Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to Why the Largest American Companies Are Using Early Access to Pay as a Retention Tool webinar. Your presenter for today, Mr. Jason Lee, is the CEO and co-founder of DailyPay, a venture-backed financial technology company that promote financial wellness. DailyPay partners with leading enterprises to offer an instant payment solution to their workforces, which results in a meaningful reduction in turnover and cost savings. The product currently serves 500,000 employees across all sectors, all services sectors, including top 5 industries in America. Before starting DailyPay, Jason was a managing director at Goldman Sachs for nearly 2 decades. Jason is a member of Forbes Financial Council and has been recognized as one of the premier thought leaders in global finance by the International Financing Review and Milken Global Institute, and has spoken at events such as CX Summit, American Payroll Association, Annual Congress, and Inventa CHRO Summits. Sir, you have the floor.
Great. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining me today. As the operator said, my name is Jason Lee, and I am the CEO of DailyPay. We are an HR tech solution that allows your employees to control the timing of when they are paid. First of all, I do want to thank HR Executive Magazine for hosting us this afternoon or morning, wherever you're dialing in from. So a couple of just housekeeping items. If for some reason you do get disconnected or if the sound bleeps out, I think you can probably just note that to the WebEx folks. We'll make sure if there are any technical difficulties that we'll get back online as quickly as we can. In the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to discuss a couple of interesting topics. Number one, the labor market challenges that are really leading to really this chaotic labor market. The demographics of your hourly employees and what they need in a benefits package, what this whole DailyPay benefit is. You may or may not have heard of this, but certainly we'll go through that in this session. And then finally, we'll explain why it is that a DailyPay benefit has such consistent ROI across any vertical or industry. I'm going to start actually this webinar with an earth-shattering question, which is, and you'll see it here on the screen, and it's going to be a polling question, so get ready to poll or answer, and that is on a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 is the highest. Please tell us how much you love sausage. Now, I've been told before this started that you only have 20 seconds to answer, and so you really got to make a quick decision here, which is, how much do you love sausage? I promise this does have something to do with what we're actually speaking about today. Okay, I can see here as the results come in here, it looks like we do have a lot of sausage lovers. Okay, so get your polls in quickly here. We're going to go through the meat. And great, I think we've got the results here. Wow, I've actually asked that question a fair amount of times, and I would say that this is probably the most evenly distributed group I've seen in terms of sausage reaction. I think the last time I did this maybe in the Midwest, I got a different reaction. So why are we going through this? For those of you who answered in the 4s or 5s, looks like you really love sausage. And I might suggest that you might consider actually moving to Germany to seek employment. Because today in Germany, the competition for qualified workers has become an existential issue for employers. Companies are now offering enticements, such as overseas tourist trips to see the Empire State Building here in New York, ski outings in the Swiss Alps, and of course, yes, you guessed it, sausage platters. After years of robust growth following the global financial crisis, unemployment has dropped in Germany to a record low of 5.4%, And Germany as a whole has about 1.2 million unfilled jobs, actually nearly equivalent to the entire population of Munich. Now, most of us would agree that our employers aren't yet quite at the stage of being able to pay for someone's vacation, or for that matter, even pay for a platter of bratwurst. But what we can do is offer our employees what they really care about, and that's financial wellness, which many times comes from more flexibility around the timing of their pay. So with that, why don't we dive right in to the current labor market challenges that we're seeing. And I don't need to go through a lot of these things with the folks on this webinar. We're aware that a lot of folks who are gathered here are in the HR/payroll/operating backgrounds. But let me kind of begin with framing who this discussion is actually for in terms of business line. And in my mind, there are really three types of companies that this webinar or this topic is super applicable for. And that is, number one, if you are in a business that offers or where the model is that you work with other companies and you've got fixed price contracts. You know, for instance, hey, we are a company that guarantees to you, our customer, that the pricing will hold for the next 3 years. Secondly, and related to this, is if you are in a business where labor or employment cost is one of your primary costs. And then finally, where number three, your business is one that is highly dependent on consistency of service. In other words, you know, for example, you know, you're in the security business, and the likelihood that your customers renew your contracts is based on the experience they've had with your employees and with your workers. And so having consistency of those employees is actually a critical factor in the performance of your business. This is a complicated way of saying any business where people cost is the primary driver of margin, you've come to the right place. Everyone knows that we're in an all-time tight labor market. Unemployment remains at an all-time low of 3.7%. And as you see on the right-hand side, the cost of employment has barely risen. And that's really a function of the fact that we've had stagnant wage growth. Now, historically, for those of you who are a little bit older, I think you're very aware that low unemployment typically has a very easy solution. If you can't find people to fill your open positions, well, you generally rely on supply and demand. If the demand is high and the supply is low, in general, you raise the price. And so historically, the way that companies have dealt with low unemployment or the inability to fill jobs has in fact been to raise wages. The paradox, however, of the Trump economy is that we are in a tight labor market, but with stubbornly low wages. Wage growth has in fact stagnated and has actually grown less than the dismal rate of inflation that we've seen. For example, in the last 2 years, if you look at the outskirts of this slide, we've seen the median wage increase by 1.5%, which is actually less than the 1.8% increase we've seen in inflation. Said differently, real wages, as I think the economists who are much smarter than us, as they call it, have actually declined over the last few years. What this really highlights is that all of us are finding it super hard to actually find employees. Almost half of employers are reporting that they have jobs to fill. And to make it more challenging, just under half of all employees are saying, including those who work for you, that they're about ready to leave their current job. You know, a few weeks ago, and I may have met some of you out there, I was actually in Chicago presenting at the Connect HR and CFO Leadership Summit on this very topic. What I spoke about was how employers should be leveraging benefits to compete in this challenging labor market. Now, at that conference, I spoke alongside the CHRO of a large hotel chain called 21C Museum Hotels, who shared that the reason why he started deploying unique benefits is because he found himself competing with other employers who were raising wages. Now, interestingly, to our surprise, as I was speaking at this very conference on the first floor of the hotel, Amazon was actually on the second floor holding a recruiting event. And again, as everyone knows, Amazon was hiring scores and scores of people, not at minimum wage, but at $15 an hour. Amazon was holding a recruiting event in our building on the floor right above the one that we were speaking at, recruiting their 400,000 people in Chicago at $15 an hour. With 400,000 people and growing, Amazon's decision to increase wages frankly makes it harder for all of us to recruit for open positions, including even this CHRO who was recruiting for his hotels in various parts of the United States. My first observation is that it's just really darn hard to recruit people. But my second observation is that by 2020, millennials and Gen Z will make up roughly 3/4 of the workforce. And the issue here is that younger generations have truly become frustrated when companies fail to address simple problems with obvious technical solutions. For example, if you have a generation that is used to pressing a button and getting a car instantly, getting a hot meal instantly, having their dry cleaned instantly, receiving that instantly. For some reason, I think it's going to be difficult for that generation to accept the reality of batch payroll. And so we've got a generation of workers who wants more flexibility in their hours, more instant transactions as it relates to commerce transactions, to consumer transactions, and for that matter, to their pay. The other thing that we all know about millennials and the next generation is that they're actually in a period of their life where their priorities are being set by their financial needs. As an example, on the right-hand side, what you'll see is that millennials face the highest cost of living ever, with rents having increased by 50% and college tuition having increased by roughly 215%. And so the environment that we are in today that has created this chaotic labor force movement is really marked by three things. Number one, the low unemployment rate makes it darn hard to hire and to fill open positions. Number two, we are in an inflationary environment, or perhaps lack thereof, where we just can't raise wages to solve for the unemployment gap. And then finally, number three, most of the workers that we're trying to recruit in the first place are more financially insecure and have culturally adapted to an instant way of living. And so the second polling question that I thought we'd ask here is the following. Have you resorted to raising wages in the last year to compete in this competitive labor market? Now, to clarify what we mean for you, I don't mean just raising wages because you raise wages every year. I'm saying, have you and your management team raised wages intentionally as a way to compete in the labor market today? So go ahead, cast your votes on the WebEx, and we'll be showing those results in the next 20 seconds or so. So one more time, have you raised wages in the last year intentionally as a means of competing for talent in this labor market? I think the results here are coming in. Great. Okay, and I think the poll here is going to wrap up. And it looks like roughly half of you have said yes, that has been the strategy that you've resorted to, and almost half of you probably either through no, or if you don't know, it's probably because you haven't, is my guess, have actually said no. And so that's a pretty good split here of folks. To those who have raised wages, I might just pause, and while I'm flattered that you did join this webinar, I might ask, is it working? Is it working? While I'm flattered that you've joined, to discover why it is that the largest employers are using early access to their wages as a means of recruiting, especially for those who answered yes. Provocatively, I would ask, is that strategy working today? And that's a good segue into, well, what is it that your employees actually want? With the current labor market as a backdrop, it's no wonder, to me at least, why employees are looking for very specific things when it comes to a benefits package. Candidly, as HR professionals and as HR practitioners, and I put myself in this group, I may dare to say that sometimes I feel that we may overcomplicate it. We may see all of the different benefits at a conference or at a trade show, or we may see all of these interesting alternatives out there, but I might just be provocative and suggest the following thesis. As an academic matter, if you might agree that at the end of the day, the employer-employee compact is really defined quite simply, and that is we pay them so that they have less financial stress, so that their lives are easier, and they typically would like to have that done in a way that increases their personal flexibility. And while all of the other benefits are important, at the end of the day, this slide defines the employer-employee compact. And so let's take a look at traditional benefits portfolios. And while I would say that each of these traditional benefits do meet the needs of the diverse workforce in some capacity, if you look across all of these, there's actually just one unifying trend, and that is that all of these employees who would access these types of services simply have a need for financial flexibility. And it is that financial flexibility which ultimately leads to financial security, which then ultimately leads to job retention. Again, the thesis that we are trying to offer to this group on the phone today is that when you cut through it, employees really just want to have the ability to live their financial lives in a way where they can pay their bills on time, they can have flexibility, and in so doing, satisfy or get their end of the employer-employee compact. And so what we're going to do here for the next couple of minutes is walk through one way, not every way, but one way that we can satisfy that compact, and that is through a daily pay benefit. Now, how many of you have actually heard of a daily pay benefit before? Go ahead and answer that poll so we kind of know, and I kind of know how to cater our thoughts here. So very quickly, just give us a quick yes or no. How many of you have heard of a daily pay benefit before? And operator, we can probably close the poll here pretty quickly on this one. This one's just a simple yes or no. And of course, that would be before this session or before hearing about this session. Great. And the poll is ended here, and we'll tell you how many folks have heard of it. Great. So about 62% have heard of it, which is great. About a third have not. And I think my guess is for the folks who have heard of it, it probably would make sense to clarify some of it. So let me kind of start from here. About 3 years ago or so, this kind of thing emerged. It was this thing called the daily pay benefit. It's a new benefits category, and it emerged. And really it was one where employees can access their wages ahead of payday, only earned wages, that is, typically to pay bills. Like most benefits that you're familiar with, the idea of the benefit was really, number one, to improve employee retention and engagement. So very similar to all other benefits. Typically, at least in our experience, it's employee paid. So, very similar to a voluntary benefit. If folks with an HR background on this call are familiar with that concept. So, purely voluntary or opt-in, so the employees typically pay the fees. Sometimes employers do pay it, but in general, it's employee funded. As we said, does not require any funding by the employer. And importantly, employees utilize the benefit only if and when needed. So very similar, for example, to a healthcare benefit, where most of us would not go to the doctor or go to the hospital just because we felt like it. In a DailyPay benefit, the idea here is employees will only use it when it's required. What we've seen here is that this benefit has become, I would say a bit of a movement, frankly. We estimate that in 2017, about 5% of the workforce had the ability to be paid daily. And certainly over the course of about 12 to 18 months, it's become a lot more than that. If you look across some of the employers, some of these, of course, you all probably heard of, perhaps some you haven't. Companies like G4S, which is right in the middle, they're the third largest private employer in the entire world. They employ about 570,000 people globally, and now every one of their security guards in North America can now receive their pay daily. Unfortunately, I spend a little bit too much time at Sprinkles Cupcakes, but you probably have all heard of them, which is a national cupcake bakery, probably in your cities. As I said, hopefully not many of you are spending time there, but the next time you go to get, their mocha chocolate cupcake, you can ask, hey, what's like now that you've been paid daily? And so you'll get a sense that a number of the big brands that employ large amounts of hourly workers are now offering this, and candidly, it's becoming a bit of a competitive advantage. In the course of the last 12 to 18 months, a lot's happened where even companies like an ADP or Ceridian are now offering this natively through their platforms, through companies like ourselves. And now we estimate certainly with ADP alone that roughly 1 of 6 Americans now have access to DailyPay. Let me pause here and just kind of go through the concept of what we're describing. And that is really the following. The big discovery that we made, or the big discovery that was made in the marketplace, was that when employees can access their earned wages on their own schedule, in other words, when they can pay themselves when they want, that actually results in a massive cultural change for the employee. And it makes sense. Here I am, I'm an employee, I'm not being paid till next Friday, but today's Wednesday. I've already worked 3 days this week. I've already earned $200 this week, but now I have rent due tonight. And instead of me waiting until payday so that I can pay my rent late and pay, unfortunately, a $30 or $50 late fee, boy, if I could just access the money I've already earned, I could pay my rent on time, I can hold my head high, and I don't have to pay a $30 or $50 late fee. And that's the big discovery that we made, which is when an employee can do that and she can access that benefit through the employer, well, now all of a sudden, that relationship with the employer has fundamentally changed. Never before has there been a way for the employee to have all of her financial needs met through one single channel, the employer. And so that is why employees stay longer. That is simply why an employee will choose not to leave the employer, but instead stay. Because now that relationship has been much more deepened because she can actually pay her bills on time. But to be clear, practically speaking, this has nothing to do with DailyPay as a company. In other words, what I just described is the benefit of simply having the ability for the employee to access pay when she wants. Said differently, you, on the phone could do this yourself, meaning if you as a company did in fact run payroll daily, well, you would realize that benefit I just described. In other words, you, the company, could do this yourself. You don't need a company like ours. You don't need a vendor like us. You don't need any of these things. If you, the company, decided practically and policy-wise that you were going to pay your employees every day, what that would mean is that all of your employees would receive 100% of their net pay daily. And you'll see that's on the left-hand side of that page. And again, you wouldn't need any of this. You could simply do this yourself. The problem, however, is your payroll folks will tell you, well, that's really darn hard. If we were to pay people daily to get all of these great HR benefits of employee retention, employee recruiting, benefiting our employees' lives, the cost of that to the employer is that, well, payroll would have to come up with their funds every day. They would have to file tax withholdings every day. There would be deductions every day. And importantly, the hours would need to be approved every day. So again, on the left-hand side of the slide, what you will see is that you don't need us. You can just run payroll daily yourself, and you get all of the benefits that are listed on the left-hand side, but there's a cost, and that is how difficult administrative it is to actually run payroll daily. On the right-hand side shows you how to use a service or how to offer a DailyPay benefit through a third party, and that is effectively getting all of the benefits of running payroll daily yourself without any of the cost. In other words, you get the benefit of employees staying longer because they are receiving their pay when they want, but we, as a company, are the ones who are funding the payroll every day. We are funding the advances. Because we are funding it, there is no change to the payroll system. There is no change to the timing of payroll funds. We are the ones who handle all of the approval of the hours and such. And so the real benefit that the HR community has seen is the fact that, hey, here's a way that technologically we can bridge the gap. We all know that we want our employees to stay longer. We all know that we want to help improve their lives. How do we use technology in a way to bridge the practical gap of not having to actually run payroll every single day? DailyPay is an ATM machine. Essentially, we offer an ATM to the employee that displays her earned wages as she earns them. The employee can choose to select any amount, in this example, $80, that she might need, for instance, to pay a bill. Unlike a loan, this is money she's already earned. And so consequently, when she taps a button for $80, she never has to pay it back. It's just like an ATM machine. When you go to your ATM machine and you take out $80, well, that money is transferred from your bank account into your hand. It is not like a week later you go back to the ATM machine to try to jam $80 back into the machine. Of course not, because it was your money to begin with. And so in the same way, DailyPay only allows an employee to transfer wages that she's already earned, in this example, $250. She can choose to receive that money instantly into her own bank account or into the company-issued payroll card. She'll confirm the transfer, and importantly, she gets a financial wellness tip. Our company is centered around financial wellness, ensuring that folks who are taking transfers are only doing it, or who are likely doing it, to pay down a bill on time. Employers can expect that roughly 30 to 50% of your employees will adopt, roughly using it about once a week, taking out about $66, and the vast majority report to us that they are using this to pay bills and avoid late fees. Folks, just think about it. The alternative is I pay a bill late and I pay on average a $30 late fee. On average, our employees are paying $1,300 a year in late fees. It's not that I don't have the money or I don't make the money, I make enough money to pay my bills. The problem is the bills are due at the wrong time. It's not a matter of quantity of pay, it's a matter of timing of pay. And because the payroll system is so antiquated, the technology that we built enables the employee to smooth out her obligations and to be able to pay her bills on time. And instead of paying $1,300 a year in late fees, she pays her bills on time, she holds up her head high, she improves her credit because now she's not paying late fees. And that's the point. Never before has there been a way for this employee to pay her bills on time through her employer. And that is why she stays longer. For the actual operators, for you all on the phone, as I said, there's no change to the payroll system. Obviously, we're compliant in all 50 states, and there's very little effort from the employer. But importantly, for those who are in HR on this webinar, this is where the rubber meets the road. What we have seen time and time and time again is the meaningful reduction in turnover, 41%. I wish that that number was lower because it would be more believable. But unfortunately, the data can't lie. The number is always between 37 and 45%, regardless of the demographic, geography, gender, ethnicity, or, importantly, industry vertical. We look at this data because we run it on behalf of our company partners, and on average, it is always roughly 41%. To be clear, it's not 3% and 80%, so therefore it averages to 41%. No, it is always in this number. And so, consequently, this is where the savings comes from this program. Secondly, as we survey, 73% of users are more motivated to come to work. Importantly, companies see a 52% increase in applicants when they advertise and change their job postings to advertise that there's a daily pay option. Can you imagine the power of an employee or a prospective candidate going to Indeed.com and filtering for only jobs that pay daily? And those jobs show up. Well, that's what our employer partners are getting the benefit of today. And that's why they see a 52% increase in applicants. When we surveyed employees, and I believe, yes, this is from October, as you can see, employees tell us that this benefit has fundamentally changed their life. 86% as of the October survey have said, I can now pay my bills on time. I've got peace of mind. Look at that last stat on this chart. 1 in 5 employees were using payday loans before they got daily pay. 1 in 5 of our employee base are going to the corner store to get a payday loan, but now they don't have to. It's no surprise that on the right-hand side, you can see the deepening effect that daily pay has with the employer and the employee. 71% of employees have said, my opinion of my employer has fundamentally changed. It's improved since offering or receiving daily pay. Have a look at that last statistic. 100% of employees say, you know what? I'm going to recommend that my friends, my loved ones, the people I spend time with, the people I have a relationship with, come and work for my employer because of daily pay. When you impact someone's financial life, the impact is remarkable in terms of the employee's reaction and the employee's opinion of the employer. And that's sort of why we start seeing this measurable, repeatable, scalable effect on the operating performance of a business. I'm going to read to you a quick quote here from a user because I think it typifies exactly why it is that the employee benefit has such an impact across the employee base. And you can read along with me, but let me take a shot here. This was from a contact center in Missouri, and this woman, Reagan Burks, writes in, and by the way, we wish you could be here in our office. We get letters upon letters, stacks of them, from folks who write things like this. When they rolled the DailyPay program out to us, I shrugged it off, regarded it as something that I'd never used. Well, after we exited the meeting about how to use DailyPay, I never really thought of it again. Now, fast forward 3 days later. I was completely broke. I owed $100 in rent that day and was relying on my overdraft on my bank account. I tried to use my debit card to pull out $100 in overdraft for a money order, and naturally, I was denied. Concerned, I called the bank, was told that my overdraft was turned off by the system, nothing they could do. Panicked, I drove towards the bank with my mind racing, trying to think of what I could do to save my situation when I remembered DailyPay. Could this work? As I waited in line at the bank, I created an account on DailyPay. The setting one up, takes less than 5 minutes. And it showed me I had $122 to use. I was unsure if it would work as quick as I needed it to, and was skeptical as my banker and I sat down to try the instant transfer option, but in literal seconds, my banker exclaimed, "It's there." He was so impressed that he asked for the information about DailyPay so he could propose it to his boss for their company to use. Parenthetically, we are in discussions now with that bank, so we definitely appreciate her referring us. And I was so relieved. I went to my apartment complex to pay my rent. I'm impressed with how easy and accurate DailyPay is. With one click of the button, I can have instant access to my funds. I think everyone on the phone gets it. This employee, Reagan Burks, trust me, she ain't leaving. She ain't leaving Gold Mountain for a while. Through this benefit that was offered through her employer, we saved her life. She got to sleep in her bed that night, not in her car that night. And so you can see the instant effect and the profound impact this has on the employer-employee relationship. Now, the results, of course, just don't touch HR and the employees. The entire business is able to see the ROI impact of a DailyPay benefit. We're not going to spend a ton of time going through this here in this webinar, but essentially there are 4 stakeholders that get to appreciate the ROI of a DailyPay benefit. We spent a bunch of time talking about the employees' financial security, but certainly the executive team also realizes financial benefits with fewer onboardings and offboardings. Of course, the HR team and the payroll team also benefit meaningfully through less work associated with all of that turnover. In terms of what we've seen in our data, and this gets to a little bit of what we spoke about before, the remarkable thing, in my opinion, is the following. This kind of shows the adoption level across various industries. And we anonymize this, of course, but what you can see is each of the industries has roughly the same level of adoption. And this is the point that we were addressing earlier. The adoption and consequently the impact on turnover doesn't matter. It does not depend, rather, on what industry you are in, or for that matter, where you are located. All of the geographies, all of the industries roughly have the same level of adoption. And so as we spoke about before, there are other great benefits that you can offer, but one of the things that we know at least, and whilst we're not experts in any of these four things, what we are experts in is a daily pay benefit. And what we can tell you with absolute certainty is there is high reliability and high quantifiability of the actual benefit. In other words, we can very easily abstract what is the impact that this is making, and what we have found is that it's highly repeatable and highly reliable. And so we're going to wrap up here and just take some questions from those who are on the phone, but some key takeaways are from this webinar are, number one, boy, oh boy, we are in the tight labor market. And I think all of us realize that. Second, whilst traditional benefit portfolios are incredibly powerful, we might argue that they may be missing out on essentially what the employees want, which is financial flexibility and ease of access. And then finally, there's this thing that's happening, which is this daily pay benefit. And perhaps that's the way to fill the gap, and importantly for HR professionals, to have a reliable, repeatable, quantifiable, scalable way to create return. The last thing I'm going to do here before we get to Q&A is we can offer a custom ROI report. All you have to do is visit this site. Boy, this site looks very complicated. I don't know if it's in English. And so you can just go to our website as well. DailyPay.com is also there. But if you want to screenshot this, it'll take you directly to the custom ROI report. You literally just type in the number of employees you have and roughly what your current turnover rate is and where you're located, and we can very easily flip back to you. I believe it comes in both Microsoft Excel as well as PDF, a report that you can sort of look at. Okay, so with that, I'm going to flip it over to, I guess, the other participants here to coordinate on questions from the audience. And I guess Preeti Krishnan from DailyPay, I think you're on the phone. I think you're coordinating these questions here.
Yep. Thank you, everyone, for all of your great questions. Just some administrative stuff to wrap up. We will be sending out this presentation to everyone who attended today. So you can reference back to the statistics and information that we discussed when you are discussing a daily pay benefit internally at your own company. In the meantime, please don't hesitate to reach out to community@dailypay.com or visit dailypay.com for more information. And with that, let's get started on addressing some of your questions. So first, we have a question about the benefit process, bringing it up the ladder itself. So our question is, I really like this idea, but I'm not sure what to do about addressing it with my CEO. What is the most effective way to communicate the daily pay benefits to him?
Sure. And we've been asked by the webinar organizers to not use names, and so I'm just going to answer this question generally. So it's a great question. How do we coordinate this through the organization? I think there's a couple of things. Number one, well, we can help, of course, and that's probably the most important thing. Book a exploratory call with one of our folks, and we've got collateral, frankly, memos, pre-canned email templates, all of the things that you need to communicate with your CEO, whether it's electronically or in person. But if you do want to have a water cooler discussion with her, what I might suggest is the following, which is, hey, look, we've got a program or an idea here which can really meaningfully reduce our turnover expense and improve our ability to fill open positions. Parenthetically, I would tell the group, Duke University, their School of Business, Fuqua, they run actually a survey every quarter. They've done it for the last 25 years. And in the first time ever, in 87 surveys, and this is a CEO survey, 87 times, for the very first time, the question they always ask is, hey, what is the most pressing concern on the CEO's minds today of the best-in-class operators? And for the very first time, the answer was employee turnover. And so my guess is your CEO is already thinking about this. This is probably already on her mind. And so like any good program, I would not oversell it. I would say, look, we'd like to explore a little bit more. We think that there's some value here. We are in a high turnover industry, and let's do some exploration.
Great. So our next question is a question around who approves the hours that are reported and how that impacts the timing of the available balance. So our statement was, the statement we received was, I would assume that the company needs to approve the hours before the employee can get an advance. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So the short answer is, and again, it's probably a longer question, a longer answer rather, but there is no additional work for HR or payroll to do. We just take the employee raw data, the raw punches, and we've got some fancy algorithms and fancy technology, which then converts that into an available balance for the actual employee. We're able to filter out missed punches, bad punches. Hey, someone says they worked for 98 hours in a row. All of those things we take out, and that's frankly part of our business. We are on risk for every single payment we make. We never go back to the employer for anything. And so that's the short answer for that question.
Great. Thank you so much. So our next question is around fees and the fee structure of the benefit. What are the fees? Our caller or participant asked. Only $2.99 transfer fee. Is that it? Are there any monthly service charges or other fees involved in this?
Yeah, so let me talk about fees. So our model is that we only charge one fee ever, and that fee is when the employee makes a transfer. So the easiest way to think about the model is it's like an ATM machine, literally like an ATM machine. So if you have an ATM machine in the office of in the lobby of your office or on the corner of your street or wherever it is, the idea here is you could pass by it every day and you never pay a fee. And the one time a year you may use the ATM machine to take out some cash, that's when you pay a fee. And that's how our product works. There are no service fees. There are no contract fees. There are no minimum fees. There are no account fees. For that matter, there are no cancellation fees. The only fee that is ever charged is when the employee takes a transfer. Now, that fee can be paid by the employee, or it can be paid by the employer, or it could be a combination. For what it's worth, most of our programs have the employees pay, and the employees are happy to, because the alternative is they're staring at $30 or $50 late fee, staring down a $30 or $50 late fee. But again, if the employer chose to fund the fee, you're more than welcome to do that. There are no other fees to the employee, and there are no other fees to the employer. There is no fee to the employer.
Great. Our next question is on the funding process. So what is the typical funding mechanism, and how do you integrate or process, the pay that you make back to the processing of weekly payroll? In other words, how does it integrate?
Sure. So again, for the avoidance of doubt, when the employee requests a transfer, we DailyPay fund that off of our own balance sheet. One more time, the employer does nothing differently as it relates to her payroll process. Nothing differently. You run payroll every Friday, you still run payroll on Friday. You send out all the payments on Friday, you still send out all the payments on Friday. You fund payroll on Friday, you still fund payroll on Friday. There is no change to the company's existing payroll process. We can walk through how it is that the technology works in the background, which is probably, for a more individualized call. But to be clear, there is no change to the company's payroll process. including the timing of payroll funds. We, DailyPay, fund every single payment on your behalf.
Great. So let's go through. Can you, one user has asked, what's the difference between a pay card and an instant payment?
Sure. Just a couple of things on that one. So we make an instant payment available to any bank account, any employer pay card, or any consumer, prepaid card that they may have bought, at the gas station or the store. So one more time, when the employee requests a transfer, it could be at 3 a.m. on Sunday night because unfortunately, our employee has gotten into a really bad car accident or she's a flat tire. She may be at the hospital. Literally, she could sign up for the account, tap a button, she requests a transfer, and she happens to be a, Federal Credit Union of Minnetonka customer. That money shows up in that account in a millisecond. And that's the technology that we've built. There is no latency. There is no waiting time. There is no delay or none of that occurs. Basically, it's an instant experience, and they can get it immediately. And then we, of course, also can pay out to bank accounts, pay cards, prepaid cards, all of those things.
Great. I think we just have time for one last question here. So this user asks, who do you work with?
Sure.
Who uses this benefit?
Sure. In terms of the population, so typically we work with employers. Number one, we only work with employers. So we do not offer this product directly to the consumer. That's not, there are some models out there, frankly, that do that. But we only work with the employer because, frankly, we want the employer to get the benefit. We want the employer to have the employees understand that this was something that the employer did on their behalf. The service, of course, is between us and the employee, of course. But we do think it's valuable for the employer to get the benefit of the reduced turnover. So number one, we only work directly with employers to their employee base. Secondly, typically we will work with companies that employ large amounts of hourly or lower income workers, including salary. So I think you probably saw that slide earlier on in the deck, but perhaps companies that you've heard of on the phone, Taco Bell, Boston Market, Burger King. We have a very large practice. If you have any elderly folks in your family, I'm going to make a guess that your caretaker or their caretakers are using DailyPay. We have a very, very large healthcare services practice. We have very large retail practice. And so, we have an expression here called DailyPay Nation. And so we expect that as the product proliferates, that a lot of the workers that you probably interact with every day in the services business or likewise are using DailyPay. I just had a situation yesterday where I had to call a customer service department for my cable, and I found out that they were a third-party call center. And so I asked, "Are you using DailyPay?" And the woman said, "Yeah, in fact, I am." These are the types of folks that we're working with.
Great. Thank you so much, Jason, for that, and thank all of you for all those great questions.
Great, and I appreciate. I see here there's a long queue of questions, and I think the operator is going to cut us off here. So I do want to make sure I say a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, thank you. If you are still on this webinar, or if you are listening to it after the fact, it's clear that you believe that there is something you can do to change the employer-employee compact. And that's the aspirational part of what we do for a living. There is something that we can do to fundamentally change the employee's life. And the employer can be part of that. I'm not talking about raising wages by 25 cents an hour. I'm talking about allowing an employee to pay her bills on time, to hold her head up high, and for you, the employer, to benefit from that. And so thank you for joining. and believing that we can do that together. Secondly, I'll encourage you on the screen that you see here to take us up on the offer. Go ahead and submit a request. See what this would mean for your business. It's a simple request. Just tell us how many employees you might have, and then we'll shoot back an ROI report. And then you can make the determination as to whether or not you think this is worth pursuing or having us educate you on a little bit more of the facts. Lastly, to HR executive, thanks so much for having us. It's great to hear that leaders and formative thought leaders in this industry believe that this is something that we can do to change the way that our employees are paid today. Operator, I think we're going to wrap up here. Is there anything else that you have? Okay, wonderful. Well, great. Thanks everyone for joining. I think this will probably be a downloadable or a viewable report later. So we'll look forward to talking to everyone live or watching again. All the best.